All right. How you retired? Huh?
I ain't figured that out yet.
Right.
What definition of it again? Oh, damn.
You're busier than ever. You're busier than ever. I shouldn't say that.
It is busy, but that's most time it's busy. Got 20 grandkids, 3 great grandkids. Keep you busy.
They'll keep you busy. Copy the minutes.
I started the recording, so when you guys are ready, we're good to go.
Wait one more minute. I don't have one. 7:30 or 6:30 yet. Get like everybody to stand and pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody, to the regular meeting of the Culver Board of Zoning Appeals. Would like to remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded and we're also online. Start out, have a secretary, please read the, or have a roll call.
Dan Adams,
Here.
Brendan McAnaway,
Present.
Dan Osborne,
Present.
Andrew Melchin,
Present.
and John Chris, present.
And we have the town manager and building commissioner and other titles.
Baker.
And Groves also. First item of agenda. First item on the agenda is approval of the September 15th minutes. You all have a copy of those in front of you. I would entertain a motion to approve them.
Second.
And I'm just going to send this around to sign at the bottom of this page. And let's see, this is 20, right? We have just one item on the agenda for this evening, one petition. This is petition 2022-021B. This is one filed by William Londrey. Mr. Londrey, if you'd like to speak to us and tell us what's going on here with your variance request.
Yes, sir. And also our architect is here as well, should there be a need for elaboration. But our home was built in 1920, we believe. So we started looking at doing a small addition modification. We had agreed that we would, well, there's already a rear deck on the property, on the home. We're just, with some other things we're doing, if we want to move the step to the other side of the south elevation near the alley. And it seemed to make sense just to leave it within the footprint of that southern elevation of the house. Then came to find out later that it was already, that was in the setback as well. We just hadn't really focused on that, but it was, you know, the house preceded the zoning, so there you go. And, you know, it's just, leaving the steps on the other side where it was, it would be impeded by an existing detached garage. There just isn't enough room for the stairs to come down, so that's why we moved it to this side, so they wouldn't interfere with the detached garage. You know, probably the most impact would be felt by the people across the alley from us. Those are the Schumers. There's about 60 feet of rear yard between the alley and the rear of their house. But anyway, I think you should have seen, they submitted a letter saying that they're fine with it. The only folks that use the alley, you know, a few times a week, I wouldn't even necessarily say daily, or us as basically a driveway, and the neighbor that's behind us that fronts on State Street. And that's so it's a sparsely used thoroughfare. And so anyway, I'm happy to try to answer any questions, but it just you know, I don't see that there's you know, an impact per se on any neighbors, given the distance from the nearest home, being the one across the alley.
So really the only, it's the same size deck, correct?
It's
A little bit bigger?
it's growing by, I think, about 60 square feet.
One thing I might add, if I could, the existing building or home, we're not proposing to go any closer to the alley than the existing home. So it's kind of like a non-conforming use now, and the stairs would be kept at the same limit back as far as the existing protrusion on the home. And the other item to note is the part that would go closer to the alley, we're not proposing any column or down structure down below. So it wouldn't impede anybody should they drive off the alley into the yard. There wouldn't be any column. The part that would be protruding out would actually be cantilevered over. So and that's what that drawing was to show there. There wasn't any column there to get in the way. So it's just up above from the deck area.
Questions? Comments?
Yeah, you have a copy.
You don't have a copy?
It'll be in your phone.
Here's brought the picture part in late and come here.
I think I have one of
You
those.
got those? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they got here.
But the deck itself is, would be replaced, it's existing deck. The deck itself is, there's one there now, it'd just be rebuilt, it's just that protrusion of the steps that's added.
So what is the current side yard setback to the furthest most?
Its current is, it's 4.8 to 5 foot, and we're looking to stay consistent with what it is on the upper part of the deck, not to go any closer than it is now.
So there's the alley, it comes right, this is the alley. It goes right up. Yeah, and so what they're doing is they just want, this, but
This part of the house almost goes out as far as that, doesn't it?
Yes.
exactly, yeah, that's what.
Yeah, we're staying within the footprint of what's
Right.
already there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I drove by it, this morning and looked and, well, the roof eco on the south end overhangs further than this is gonna be. Plus you got right up close to the street, you've got that retaining wall
Yes,
that comes right up to the side of the alley. And I said, this Like it's gonna be fine.
This is the alley here. Right, so he's coming out as
We
far.
thought we had done a good job. We were staying within the footprint and then we got
That's, we're not dealing.
and the permit was denied and
Get it, yeah.
didn't
Right.
realize.
Any other questions, any comments?
I'll just make a comment. I grew up one street over from that property. And I, as a kid, I walked, I was in that neighborhood. There is literally very little traffic that goes down that alley. And if it was if we were talking about the adjacent property owner being 5 feet away and the fact that there's an alley there, I see no issue with this at all.
And we did get a letter from the Schumer.
Absolutely. The Schumers approved this. Like I said, and the fact that it's not coming out any further than the existing home, the footprint of the home. That I don't see much of an issue with this at all.
Any other comments, questions?
I did notice one other thing that or what do you call it,
Impervious?
impervious, yeah, it was 48%. Do we need to address that specifically? Because I believe doesn't it say calls for 50%?
Well,
Well,
I
well,
thought
that's
the same
conforming.
thing when I read it, but it's, yeah, it's 52% is, they're okay at the 50%.
Okay.
Impervious. Is right.
Impervious.
It's more than
Yeah, so we're looking at 50% of.
Okay,
so they're-
I just misread that.
Started off advertising that way and Paige caught it because I read it the same way you did. And then I redid the publication before we had to publish that.
Yeah, I read that 3 times to make sure it was.
Yeah.
Me too.
One thing we do look at, but as part of that, I was concerned with that, but I knew it was close either way, and we're not adding any impervious area to the property. So I think it's looking at the same thing as what our charge setback.
Do we have anybody online?
No, just the media.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? We'll go to finding of facts. I'm sorry, the question was asked about the side yard setback. What is it you're asking for?
We're asking to be lined up with the existing home, which is 5 foot, 4.8 foot, we believe.
So this is going to be a completely new house. You're taking this house down, this is remodel.
Remodel.
Just
It's a
remodeling.
very small, actually, visually from the outside, you're not gonna see really any difference. It's gonna look the same. There's a corner we're building out to let the kitchen flow a little better, but that's on the other side of the house. That's not opposite the alley.
Okay.
So, yeah, no, it's not a tear down, baby. Keeping what we got.
Is everybody ready? Remember, if you answer no to any of these three questions, you must vote no on the variance. Based upon the evidence submitted, I find that number one, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Mr. Melson,
Yes.
Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. McManaway.
Yeah.
Mr. Chris,
Yes.
the chair votes yes. Number two, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Mr. Melson,
Yes.
Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. McManaway,
Yes.
Mr. Chris,
Yes.
the chair votes yes. And number three, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. Mr. Melson,
Yes.
Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. McManaway,
Yes.
Mr. Chris,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. We entertain a motion that we approve this variance.
Second.
Been moved and properly second that we approve this variance. Any further discussion? Not? How do you vote on the motion, Mr. Melson,
Yes.
Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. McManaway?
Yes.
Mr. Chris,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Approved 5-0. Okay? Thank you.
So what happens now?
Now, I will enter their findings into the permit system, so when it triggers the plan director of the county, we'll see that this has been approved. He may ask me for a copy of the minutes, but usually he just trusts that I've entered it properly based on sitting here. And then he will, approve your permit.
Okay, then at that point, we can proceed.
Yeah.
What should we expect as far as the turnaround time?
I usually do it after I leave their meeting, so the plan director would approve you tomorrow. Yeah, and he's usually pretty good at, especially when it gets to the stage of approval. And if you don't get that approval by end of tomorrow, let me know and I'll ping them for you on Monday.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you all for your time this evening.
Coming in.
We appreciate it.
This might be the record, Dan.
It could be. I'm like pretty excited about this. I can get home and watch Wheel of Fortune. 7.
I'll have to stay till all the brownies are.
Right. If you would like to take one with you,
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
double bonus.
Please do, and they are good.
Yeah, they are really good.
There's napkins here, plates here. Actually have one, please do. Don't be.
I think I spoke to you on the phone. I'm Chet.
Possibly. Oh,
I just
okay.
thought I put
Yeah,
it.
nice to meet you.
Did we exit?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You gotta take it back.
Yeah, we can rescind that if you don't take a break.
Well, all right, well, I don't want that.
There's plates there.
Yeah. Look at everybody, oh, they got their heads. Oh, here we go. Yeah. That's right.
What a bonus. Thank you all
There you
so
go.
much.
Not everybody
You're welcome.
gets benefit.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care, you guys.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's not a TV show. There's not something in here funny. Okay.
There you are on recording.
Any new business we need to talk about?
No, but I did have a question for you guys, because it came up with, you approved a variance for Sage Road, which is that property that has the barn. And, Mr. Easterday came in, to apply for a PUD for that same property because they want to put up 2 other buildings on that property. And it's like, I think it's 53 acres, was it, Gary?
It's not really on Sage Road. It's called Sage Road, whatever. It's actually
Yeah,
on
the
Twentieth Road.
case is called that or something.
It's all the road.
So it, But we've never, to my knowledge, had a situation where there's been a variance approved while it's zoned one way, but then they've come in to rezone the property. And part of the site plan will have that barn in it. And with a PUD, the plan commission's approving the entire site plan usually. So you don't normally go through BZA. So it's just an I wondered if you guys had ever heard of that situation happening before.
I just drove by there today wondering if they were starting anything and didn't think they had started.
Yeah,
Well, if they-
I did the same thing, because I was wondering about the time limit for tearing down the house. And I didn't know if anything had been moved forward or for anything else on the time limit.
If they zone it PUD, do they have to tear down that, initial bump?
Do they?
well, it would technically depend on what they're doing on that site plan. You're usually approving at plan commission, they approve they do a primary review of the site plan. Then the secondary review is just, if nothing's changed, they submit a construction schedule, landscape plan.
Right.
I think there's 3 documents in the secondary review.
Even,
But you're really just looking at that site plan, and that's what you're approving,
Because they didn't want to subdivide it.
right?
and they're still not wanting to
No,
subdivide.
but with the PUD, they could technically keep that there and still build the second bump.
Well,
This is the way I look at it. Correct me if I'm wrong. If anybody has any kind of opposition, let me know. Because it's my understanding that variance was allowed or approved based on the zoning. And if it does become PUD, it's no longer S1.
Right.
So it would not, the variance wouldn't even apply to it anymore because it's no longer S1.
Right,
Right.
which means that the stipulation of tearing down that building,
The
Doesn't
stipulation
apply.
tearing down does not apply anymore.
so that, I think that's why I think they're doing that as opposed to subdividing it so they can keep those.
But my understanding, they are tearing it down anyway, but they're
Yeah,
rebuilding
they
something
wanna
else
add,
in place.
2 other buildings.
They've
There'd
got it.
be, the barn is here, another building here, one over
They
here.
got a big lodge. And then, like I said, and all 3 have living quarters.
I was thinking they were not gonna tear down that whole building, they were just gonna tear down the
We did.
part on
they
the
did
east
want
end
to,
that was the residential part of it.
Well, they said they were gonna keep the barn even after the time limit because they were using for storage for their equipment and.
I think the only thing we approved was the sidewalk.
Partial.
If they tore out, the only thing that we had to do on the variance was approve the sidewalk.
Well, we have,
Because they said they were gonna tear down the other part, so they didn't need a variance on that because it's 2 residential things.
I think we put a
But it was a
stipulation. on the
stipulation that it
approval.
would have to be tore down, and they had, it was either 6 months or 9 months, I don't even remember, I'd have to try and find it.
I mean, it just had to be torn down prior to occupancy of the new building.
Right. But we still had it, I think Chuck actually wanted.
Wonder when that was.
And we did have it, that would have been
June.
May probably, but
May or June.
it was in May or June.
And it looks like, the other 2 buildings they would add, I think one they called a clubhouse and one's called a field house.
Yeah.
So one was more like a games, sports stuff, and then one was like a gathering space that had a little mini pond that ran under part of it and drained into the big pond.
I mean, and I don't know the stipulations of the PUDs, I'm not an expert on that.
It'll
I know
It'll
this
get
is-
advertised
don't
next
have it.
week and then it'll go to plan commission in November.
I mean, that's, in my personal opinion, if changing the zoning to PUD alleviates the need for things that have a BZA here, then I don't see why.
I mean, I was a little bit objective, but I didn't say I was against it. Because basically, I'm not sure exactly what would be required as far as it fitting a PUD. I know the multiple uses and
Multiple residents.
multiple residents, but in no way did I think that we could do a PUD only for the benefit of the owner. You know, what I mean, it's like we have ordinances, standards, setbacks, everything else. And a PUD does alleviate that standard because it's gonna be, they use the word negotiate, but or realize what they can do under their plan.
Right, and
And it does avoid variances because it's not required to come before BZA because they're not meeting their 10-foot setbacks between properties, whatever.
But that's not why they're really doing it. They're not doing it because of the restricted setbacks or anything like that. They're
Right,
just
this is
building
a
it.
massive property, they're.
Yeah, they just want to do it because, right.
Right.
So, yeah, it's kind of a,
Yeah, and I mean, Jenny said before, you know, to her, it looks like it's the best fit for what they want to do is a PUD. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, I was looking in the other zones because some of them you can allow for campground or whatever, but a lot of them imply commercial usage and they're not using it for commercial reasons.
which is required in a PUD.
And
Not
it's
anymore.
50 some acres and usually a PUD, sometimes it's because they're larger properties, you have multiple buildings. So it kind of made sense that way, and we no longer require commercial usage on a PUD.
And they're not gonna open that up to a public campground.
no,
Right.
that's not their intention at all.
Right.
And I know that removing the commercial was to open up more for
To
development.
make it more
That's
flexible.
not what they're gonna
But what they're doing is just, yeah, I know.
The problem is that our PUD language doesn't.
do. Really doesn't
Define.
specify
Doesn't
something
regulate.
like this.
And I was
It
gonna say
does
that.
not. It doesn't cover
Because
something like
the
that.
Yeah,
reason for the
references, I think,
commercial
the
was to
common.
guarantee for commercial, for multiple use. And by taking the commercial out, we were taking commercial out, so it wouldn't
Take out
necessarily have to be
multiple use.
commercial, but it
Right.
should have been another use, you know, and if the wording is not
Well,
defined
And
enough.
that does make a good point about 415 Lakeshore. It's currently zone C2. You can currently build the same thing they want to build there.
Or
but commercial
Retail down
on-
below.
yeah.
On top, you could do the same thing on top of
Yeah,
retail down
exactly.
below.
and you'd end up hitting the 35-foot height likely, instead of where they're at is like 27,
Right, yeah, they
28.
could do that. They could do that
They could
easily.
do it
It'd
today,
never be occupied.
but they didn't want to have commercial in it. So that's why they wanted the PUD route, because it is an unusual property surrounded by 3 roads, which is a bit of a hardship on it. 2 roads, I understand can be a hardship, but you have 3 roads on that property. They didn't want to put commercial in it, so that's why they went the PUD route. And it kind of makes sense, because if they stayed with C2, they would be stuck with putting commercial on that first floor and
Sure.
then have even a bigger building.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, to me, I wasn't sure how to look at this because it's obviously not gonna have commercial usage. It is a massive property.
It's not the
Multiple
typical
buildings.
PUD.
Typical PUD.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what somebody would ask for, so we're like, okay, what, you know,
Yeah.
is
I
it
mean,
that big, is it that big of a deal?
It's
not.
It's not a
It's
big
not,
deal.
it's not
It's not a big deal for that.
for that,
property.
for that particular property, but, you
I
know,
guess my concern is setting a precedent for PUDs
well,
when,
True, but we can't.
don't get
we
me
can't-
wrong, I'm
we
not
can't-
against it, I'm not arguing against it.
Well, and I don't have to make this decision, but we have to be careful about taking what we think it should be written as versus how it's actually written.
Right, and that's what we're at right now.
It's a unique, what's unique about Culver is a lot of our PUDs aren't typical of what you'd see in a bigger city
No.
PUD. Because we just don't have huge lots in general. And Maple Ridge is one of the few PUDs that's pretty large. But we have PUDs in town that are quite small.
That still required the commercial element. And it's
Yeah,
there and no
back
one
in
ever
its
uses
day,
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
And the one that Bestie had proposed, and we gotta go separate, but, you know, you had the housing,
All on one side.
and you had actually a commercial
Lot.
building,
Yeah.
and, you know, that one was a, really fit the whole design for a PUD. You know, Kevin, you know, and you know, they make pretty bold. I mean, they've got the building out front, housing. Naturally, I mean, they got office buildings, everything else, it's actually multiple use without the commercial. And me, only me, I'm sitting there thinking, you know, we did the right thing by taking commercial out. But then when we come back and realize that, I don't know that they would have even had to put that to make it multiple use, because only thing was the difference, if you sold every house and then.
And you don't really, by our current zoning, multiple use is not necessarily a necessity of PUD, because you also reference in that definition, if it meets the goal of the town in a comprehensive plan, well, housing is one of the number one problems
Exactly.
in town, so you're meeting that goal, so you kind of go, okay.
Yeah, but you
That's
can't
why it made sense on 415, I think, for the plan
Right.
commission when they approved it.
own 4 lots in R1 or R2. You had 4 lots, they combined, make a PUD for housing, that comes through there, you say the same thing, we need the housing. How you make it a PUD in town, when you've got the same thing. Houses are going up anyway in town. You make a PUD, just so a person can put it in there and then put 15 feet apart instead of 20.
Well, yeah, I think that eventually we need to be addressed, but.
I think
Right.
this situation that comes up, it does open your eyes a little bit, you know.
Well, it's another alternative that you never thought about.
Right.
It's a situation
Yeah,
that's,
it's not
okay, it's
situation
a
that
PUD,
I
but
can't-
okay, all of a sudden we have a PUD that really doesn't apply to what our normal PUDs that we're looking at.
And I mean, you.
So how do we address that?
Yeah.
And,
You could
you
also
know,
put language in there.
we have
about,
to
you know,
put it in,
50
you know,
plus acres has a different maybe set of stipulations than a PUD that's in a 5
Yeah.
acre
right.
area.
I mean, I just appreciate how much, critical thinking goes into it. It's the plan commission, I mean, they even asked for changes on that one, so they had to come back. So there's like a lot of back and forth on, well, this could be a traffic issue, or it could be a safety issue, or whatever the case is. I do think that is the important thing, is that we have members who take the time to like really study each case, because each case seems very unique to me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
yeah.
And Culver alone is unique enough.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
non-conforming lots and conforming, and
But, you know, and you mentioned that, you know, like when Kevin came to the plan commission because they wanted to put the schoolhouse, the little school shed, whatever, for
Uh-huh.
kids to get on the bus from. And he was putting it over on an area that wasn't in the design for the PUD. Kevin came back before the plan commission and asked if he needed to come back for a change or that, or being just for the school bus, because it wasn't gonna change the traffic through whatever. Yeah, but I mean, Kevin even took that step forward, you know,
Yeah.
to come back for the PUD to address what they wanted to do for kids.
the other news might be that the plan commission just approved 3 changes to the zoning ordinance that'll go to the council next. And those changes would be to allow in a non-conforming lot a 10-foot rear yard setback. For a non-conforming lot, 10-foot rear yard setback instead of 25-foot would be allowed.
And that's for non-conforming lot.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other change is, we wouldn't require advertising in the Culver Citizen. It could be any local newspaper such as the Pilot News. So there's some new language there. And then the third one was something we discovered, Barry and I, and cleaning up some of the fires that have occurred the last few weeks. The plan director at the county was holding some permits because they required a TRC meeting. In one case, it was an L1, a demolition. And I'm like, why would we have to do a TRC meeting on a demolition? And he's like, because it's in your ordinance, it's not exempt. So like if you go to, I think it's page 138 of the ordinance, there's a list of exemptions that don't have to do that meeting. It's certain zones, but in all these other zones, you have to do it. We haven't been doing it, so I frantically rushed to get that one in. Well, I took that to plan commission as, can we exempt demos? Because we have been accepting them to no one's knowledge. So those are the 3 changes plan commission just approved to recommend to the town council. And so we'll be able to update the ordinance once the council approves that. We'll advertise that next week.
And we've got a couple more amendments, I call it,
Yeah.
ordinances that we're.
Once the
looking at.
judge makes the decision on that PUD, I think the plan commission will look at the PUD stuff. And see if they want to make some changes. But Jim didn't want us to make changes to PUD stuff yet until that had been decided.
Yeah, because the PUD changes and some on L one as far as. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter, but as far as line of sight that's been used on the ordinances, it's already a 25-foot setback as well. I mean, we're looking at that too, but we want to wait until actually, like people are actually going to come and address it themselves. We want the input, and I won't think that we're going to do something.
On the
in
really
the
big
winter,
ones,
out
like
here,
that,
Right.
we want the residents in town before you change their zoning.
Or we finished?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, I have a question for Dan. So as we go through our procedure here and we go to finding of facts. And so if I check mark, yes, yes, yes. And then you ask me if you go back and ask me can I disapprove the variance even though I voted?
I suppose.
Yes,
I don't know.
For a reason that's not on the finding of the facts?
yes.
I would say
Okay,
good.
for whatever reason that might be, I can still, okay, I just want to clarify that.
I never thought about that, but I think.
Because you come back and ask us, even though I've check marked everything, yes, yes, yes,
Right,
I can still disapprove of the variance.
right. The
Okay.
finding of facts is.
So might
And-
not fit one of those categories, is that what you're thinking?
Well, yeah, if it falls out of something, if, something's been said that was, misconstrued or, somebody says something that wasn't factual or whatever, and, I find that and there's, I'm just, I don't know if it's ever happened before.
I've never seen that happen.
Well, because that's what I'm saying. You always come back and ask us if we still, after we've checkboxed everything, you come back and still ask us if we approve them. That's why I'm asking this. So, okay.
It's a good question, but I had always, I shouldn't assume anything, but your vote is for what you want to approve it with, even though you may not agree with it, but it still meets the finding of fact.
Well, that's what I'm asking. I don't
And
know.
I've always felt that you can vote no. You've got that right to vote.
Well,
I would
that's
just
what I
be
didn't know,
clear that
because-
they can use your findings of facts as documentation if they were to
Look, I
appeal
think
it.
that if you're going to vote no after checking yes, you better have a good comment below about what else outstanding.
well, that's what I'm saying. Outside of the finding of the facts that there was something that you knew or was said that did not agree. And that's why I say, well, that's why when you come back and ask us that, that's why I was wondered about, okay, well, I've already approved everything. I've already approved everything of finding the facts, and you're still asking me if I still approve the variance.
Well, because we also asked for further comments after the finding of facts, right? So after the finding of facts, you could still say something and that can change your mind between the time you fill that out. and the time-
But I could still say I don't approve it.
Yeah, you open floor to,
Okay,
Further
so I can
discussion.
say, okay, this is the reason that I don't, okay, even though I agree with the finding of the facts, this is the reason that I'm not approving of this. Then again, state why you would do that. Because somebody's out there, they're going, okay, you voted for this, and all of a sudden why did you not vote to approve it?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me
I
clear
was
that.
thinking
I just want to
some
clear that up.
members Say
Yeah.
one thing in support and then vote against something. And even not give a reason. I see now.
Well, I would think if I was out there, somebody voted, did the finding of facts and approved everything, and they, all of a sudden they didn't approve it, I would want to know what the reason was.
sure,
Right?
Right.
And I think that, if I was that person that, was objecting and said no, I think that I should state why I did not agree with it, or why I would not approve the variance, right?
that's my feeling. And
Okay.
I've never read it.
But it's never, this has never happened before.
No, I've
Okay.
never, as long as I've been
Don't go
on,
breaking news.
that's.
All right, well, you know what, I just,
You're not gonna be able to do
because he
that
asked
for,
us again,
Wheel
you
of
know what I'm
Fortune.
saying? I've already agreed to it, and then he asked me again, do you approve it? I'm like, well, I already approved it. I
I'll
thought.
tell you what,
Yeah, you
I'm
can.
glad you brought the question up, because I mean, there's been times that I almost voted no, but I just couldn't rationalize enough reason why I wouldn't vote for it. But I was right there, like
Right, well,
I didn't really want to agree with it, but as far as finding facts was,
And I think that's why the finding of facts is there.
and finding facts was
Because
there, and I went
it
ahead and
takes some of
voted
your
yes,
personal opinion out of it.
but I always felt that I.
well,
should
that's
vote.
right, but, you know,
But I think,
it does, but
Because think about the law case, though. Process is part of what you can be sued for too, like. There's a process put in place, you're gonna answer these findings of fact. And then if you vote against, you probably would want to justify it if.
because otherwise they're gonna say, okay, he voted for all this and all of a sudden I'm gonna.
For sure. I mean, if you're agreeing to everything to find the facts and your reason that you're voting no is 100% personal.
oh, I don't agree with
I
that.
think that's where it would get.
They may not know
Well,
that.
You know, in personal, in what way? I
Well-
mean, you know.
I'll tell you what, I'll go back. but
Then you should
Not
recuse yourself.
necessarily to be.
I didn't want to make, I'm sorry, Dan.
Oh, no,
I
that's all right.
thought this meeting was gonna be very short.
Yes.
And we'd be out here
Sure.
and I could
And
watch.
Wheel of Fortune's
and I could watch
halfway over.
Wheel of Fortune's damn sure. It is, it's 10 minutes.
20 minutes.
You know what? I can get for the, final with the spin, right?
Yeah.
I get home for the spin, so I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Cause that's all I really care about.
Let me say this,
Okay,
when we have extra little bit of time at the BJ meeting and you have questions just like that right there, that's the time for them.
Right, it
You're
is,
not-
cause otherwise they're ready to go
I
after,
mean,
after
everything else,
9:30 or
you
10
know, you
o'clock.
go through, sometimes when the chairs are full,
Right, I
you're
know.
not wanting anything but to go home, and you're not really even thinking about some of these questions that you might have thought of
Right.
last week or last month.
That's right.
They went
But
for
I
2
think-
hours on Tuesday night.
I think last time, we only had one on the docket, and it took an hour and
Hey,
a half.
just wait. Your time's coming. Your time's coming, buddy. Your time's
You can-
coming.
you can-
That's Dan.
You can,
That's
this is
Dan.
probably
We've
not,
had some doozies, man.
this
We've had like
is probably
5.
not really give a test, but it could come in for PUDs, plan commission meetings,
Oh, jeez.
and some of them are very interesting.
Okay,
has
Barry,
some-
you still, Barry, you
Oh,
still enough.
I was one of the ones 5 minutes back, so I remember.
Barry, you're-
Anything else, Jenny?
I'm shutting you off.
I I have something I need to say.
Oh,
I have to miss the next meeting. Due to a number of things happening, I was planning on leaving for Turkey the day after the November meeting, but my college diving coach passed away in the spring, and they finally scheduled a time for a memorial. And that's in the 1st of December. So,
I'll
So-
take minutes for you at that one.
well, I can probably attend.
Remotely.
But I'm gonna be in Turkey, and they are 8 hours ahead of us.
You could just not.
Yeah, just don't worry
Okay.
about it.
Okay.
You know, actually, I like
Do
to
we
say
have
something.
anything on the docket?
I like to
right now?
commend the job you're doing
What's
as
that gonna be?
secretary. I think you're doing a great job. I
You
mean,
just
the
have to
minutes,
get
the
up-
minutes have been awesome.
You just have to do that 410, right?
Yeah. So I would like to commend Don on doing it.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, yeah, make
Thank,
sure-
thank you.
Okay, we
Thank
are.
you.
we're-
7:12.
Take some
Wow.
brownies.
Can you write that down as a meet reference?